Recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lieutenant Harold, how long is the academy that you attended to become a Pennsylvania State Trooper?
Approximately 6 months.
And during that 6 months, how much time was spent on personal protection training or providing security at political rallies?
Very little.
Yeah, if not any, right?
Right.
Would that be the same, Commander Lenz and Officer Blasco?
Correct. There's,
Similar?
to my knowledge, none in the police academy.
Agent Sullivan, when you went through the academy training, was it 6 months like it is now?
The first school was 12 weeks in Glencoe, Georgia, and the second Secret Service was about 16 weeks.
Fair to say that about 5 to 6 of those weeks were spent on how to secure perimeters and things like that at political rallies?
Yes, it was
and personal protection?
The vast majority was protective intelligence investigations, protection.
Right. And then when you actually went on a protective tour, it's about 5 or 6 years? That accurate?
You'd have to be an agent for at least 5 or 6 years before you could be assigned to protective detail.
Right, but a protective tour lasts about 5 years or so?
No, when I was an agent, it was between 3 and 4 years.
Okay, it's about 5 years now.
Or more, yes, sir.
So fair to say, I think we've established that the experts in protection are the Secret Service and not local law enforcement. You do a lot of other things. To illustrate for the American people the abject historical failure of the Secret Service, because they're supposed to be the premier protective agency in the world, and on July 13th, they were anything but. And Helen Comparatori doesn't have a husband because of that. So when I visited the Butler farm, the Butler farm show and the AGR complex, two things struck me. The absolute, that proximity of the AGR building to where the stage was where President Trump was speaking. And also, when you're on the other side of that very limp chain link fence, how much, I'm shocked as to how many people were milling about that didn't go through any magnetometers or any security checks. Officer Blasco, do you have any idea how many people were on the grounds that day on the AGR
on the
property?
AGR complex?
Yeah.
From talking to the sniper units in the AGR building, they said there was approximately 150 to 200 people.
Okay, so there were hundreds there. All right. And so, let me ask you this. Is the AGR property, it's outside the security perimeter, but there were hundreds of people 50 yards closer to the president than the shooter. We know who they were. Commander Lenz, what's the highest structure in the direct proximity of the AGR building?
The roof of the second floor of the AGR complex.
But in the water tower.
In the water tower, yes.
The highest one. Did the Secret Service ask you all to post anybody up on the water tower?
No, they did not.
Okay. Would that have helped perhaps secure the area and mitigate the threat of the AGR building if we had somebody up there?
I think it would help secure the AGR complex.
Because you had a clear line of sight on it if somebody was up there, right?
Correct.
Yeah. But they didn't do that, did they?
They did not.
All right. Commander Lenz, as far as the walkthroughs, did the Secret Service perform a walkthrough with you all?
They did.
They did?
On Thursday, there was a police walkthrough.
Okay. And during that walkthrough, did they help you and advise you as to how to secure the AGR building?
They did not.
They did not. Lieutenant Harold?
Our walkthrough was Thursday, and AGR building was not discussed.
Wasn't discussed?
Yeah, we were inside the fence line of the farm show, and we picked they picked their stationary post where they wanted troopers assigned within the perimeter, and the AGR building was never discussed.
Okay, so we could have surrounded that building with, say, 8 or 10 officers, and it probably would have mitigated the threat the AGR building presented. Fair to say?
Yes.
And the Secret Service didn't ask you to do that?
No.
Okay. How about just clearing the area entirely? It's about 17 acres, but only about 4 or 5 of those acres have line of sight to where the president was speaking. Did they ask you to maybe put up some stakes around the perimeter, police tape, no trespassing? They asked you to do that?
No, I knew AGR. I knew the parking was restricted that day. The business was not going to allow parking, but there was no other communication regarding the AGR.
If the AGR property had been cleared, with police tape and some, don't trespass and nobody other than law enforcement walking about, would that have helped secure the area and mitigate the threat of the AGR building presented?
No, it would have, but like I know that they were going to sweep the farm show, so I'm not sure if that area was swept by Secret Service or not. I have no knowledge of that.
We know that there were hundreds of people that didn't go through any security checks that were milling about on that property that day.
Outside
Could have
the
presented
fence is
a grave
correct.
threat, and we just got lucky in that regard.
Yes, sir.
Do you think that, I'd say Lieutenant Harold again, were law enforcement stationed on the roof of the AGR building? Did the Secret Service ask you to put people on the roof?
PSP was not asked to put anybody on the
Okay.
roof of the AGR.
Commander Lenz, were you asked to put anybody on the roof?
We were not.
Officer Blasco?
No.
No. But if there had been law enforcement on the roof, probably wouldn't have had a shooter on the roof. Fair to say?
True.
Yeah. How about drones? Agent Sullivan, to the best of your knowledge, were drones deployed that day to help mitigate the threat that the AGR complex presented?
Mr. Fallon, having not been there, it's my understanding they weren't. The Secret Service had some technical issues with the drone. That's my understanding from public knowledge.
Lieutenant Harold, if cameras had been placed on the AGR roof, would that have helped mitigate the threat?
That would have.
Where the Secret Service didn't place any cameras to your knowledge, did they?
Not aware of any cameras on the roof of the AGR building.
There's about 7 different ways the Secret Service could have secured that building. A 10-year-old looking at that satellite image could have seen that the greatest threat posed to the president that day outside the security perimeter was the AGR building and that roof. And a 20-year-old with a week's notice figured it out and outsmarted and outmaneuvered the entire U.S. Secret Service. And that is a shame, and it's a stain on their agency. And the best way to prevent these from happening is you don't react to them, you prevent them in the first place. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon.